Hey guys, tonight we're sneaking behind the velvet curtains, past the silk dressing gowns and the suspiciously large powdered wigs, into a world so drenched in luxury that it makes modern influencer culture look like a Craigslist yard sale. Welcome to Regency England, where being filthy rich didn't just mean having more money than sense, but also having more chamber pots than close friends. But before you collapse into your fainting couch in anticipation, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location, and let me know if you're listening from a four-poster bed, a pull-out couch, or somewhere in between. Statistically, at least 3 of you are probably listening from the bathroom. I respect the hustle. Now, dim those lights, switch on your fan for some aristocratic white noise, and get comfortable. Maybe pull the covers up just a bit tighter, because we're about to dive into a life of silk sheets, questionable hygiene, and more awkward social rules than a modern HOA. But seriously, have you ever wondered what it's like to have a butler for your butler? Did rich people ever wash their own hair? Or was that strictly a job for someone named Mildred? What did the inside of a Regency wardrobe smell like after a week of wearing the same cravat? How did the 1% keep themselves entertained before Netflix, dueling perhaps, or just casually inventing new ways to judge each other? What happened when your carriage got stuck in the mud on the way to the Duke's ball, and what did you do if you realised midway through dinner that you were seated next to someone whose family only had one estate? Was it possible to overdose on tiny cucumber sandwiches? And what's the Regency equivalent of texting your ex at 2 a.m? Congratulations. You've just woken up in 1812, the height of Regency England. You're obscenely wealthy, you're probably wearing pantaloons, and you have a moral allergy to manual labour. Let's see if you can survive a day in the life of the filthy rich. Good luck. You open your eyes not to an alarm clock but to the gentle sound of an underpaid maid tiptoeing across Persian rugs, hauling a porcelain basin of water so cold it could shock a corpse awake. The sunlight slithers through embroidered drapes, and before you've even had a chance to yawn, 3 different people are already fighting over who gets to comb your hair. It's a tough life, but someone has to nap through it. Outside your cocoon of brocaded bedclothes, the world stirs in a symphony of shuffling slippers, rustling petticoats, and the faint clinking of silver on porcelain. Before you're truly awake, you catch the scent of rosewater and furniture polish, an aroma that says privilege with undertones of mild mildew and last night's candle wax. Your pillow is so soft that it's possibly illegal in 4 countries, and your sheets are a masterpiece of thread count, though you suspect the laundry is mostly ceremonial. There's a routine to all this, a choreography of waking up rich in Regency England. First, a housemaid whisks open the heavy curtains, letting in just enough morning to make you reconsider your life choices. Next, the ever-loyal valet or lady's maid appears, bearing news of the weather and whatever trivial scandal has already started brewing downstairs. Your job is simple. Lie back and pretend you slept well, even though you spent half the night worrying about which colour cravat is least likely to offend the Duchess of somewhere important. The morning wash is a ritual unto itself. There's no hot shower or rainfall massage setting, only the aforementioned basin of glacial water, a bar of soap the size of a hamster, and a washcloth that feels suspiciously like fine sandpaper. Your skin, accustomed to pampering, protests the shock. You might dab your face delicately, as if removing a single speck of dust could cause irreparable harm. Meanwhile, a servant stands nearby, politely pretending not to notice you wincing as you try not to splash icy droplets onto the sheets. In modern terms, it's like washing up in a very expensive, highly judged camping trip, except you can't leave bad reviews. As you shiver and dry off, you're reminded that luxury comes with layers. Before you can even reach for your dressing gown, someone else is already holding it open for you. There's no such thing as privacy. You're a celebrity in your own bedroom, attended by a team that knows your moles, scars, and irrational aversions to lavender. The process of getting dressed hasn't even started, but already your personal dignity is somewhere out in the garden, hiding behind the shrubbery. Then come the hair and grooming rituals, a competitive sport among the wealthy. There are combs made of tortoiseshell, toothbrushes with boar bristles, and more scented oils than a modern wellness influencer's entire collection. Every tangle is debated, every curl negotiated. The final style must strike the impossible balance between effortless natural beauty and 3 servants spent an hour on this. By the time your head is declared presentable, you could have written a short novel or invented a new kind of breakfast cereal. Breakfast will come soon, but for now you're expected to glide about your chamber, striking poses in your dressing gown and trying not to trip over your own slippers. The servants whisk away your basin and towels, leaving you with a vague impression that you might actually be royalty, or at least a well-fed houseplant. And as you finally shuffle toward the wardrobe for the next ordeal, getting dressed, you might spare a brief silent wish for just 5 more minutes in bed. But there's no time. A new day in Regency luxury is calling, and it takes a small army to get you out of it. Because here, every morning is a performance, and you're the main attraction, freshly washed, slightly chilly, and one polite yawn away from greatness. Your bed is a towering fortress of silk, goose down, and enough embroidery to choke a horse. But beneath all the layers lurks danger, mysterious lumps, ancient stains, and the ever-present risk of bed bugs with noble titles of their own. You consider the odds. Will you make it to breakfast without developing a rash only seen in the upper classes? This is not your modern, memory foam mattress with cooling gel and a 10-year warranty. No, your Regency bed is more like a soft, lumpy monument to centuries of questionable sleep science. There are at least 3 feather mattresses stacked so high that falling out of bed could count as an attempted escape. And while the sheets are technically fresh, you know for a fact that the laundress and the footman have different definitions of clean. One uses soap, the other swears by shaking out crumbs and hoping for the best. The moment you slide between the sheets, you're enveloped in a cloud of perfume and starch. The top cover is a brocade quilt heavy enough to pin a small child. Embroidered pillow shams announce to any would-be visitor that your family's both wealthy and deeply insecure about it. Your feet, lost somewhere in the endless bedding, discover mysterious objects, a forgotten sachet of lavender, a cold spot that feels disturbingly damp, and, if you're truly unlucky, the corner of an old handkerchief that's probably been there since last season. You lie back and listen. The bedchamber, so elegant by daylight, is not quiet. The walls creak with every breeze. There's a persistent scuffling from somewhere under the bed, a sort of rodent symphony that no amount of money seems able to silence. Occasionally you'll hear the soft patter of a maid's feet in the corridor, or the very faint clink of chamber pots being exchanged, because nothing says luxury quite like a small porcelain bucket waiting patiently beneath your four-poster for its moment to shine. But it's what you can't see that is truly unsettling. Bedbugs, the hidden aristocracy of the textile world, feeding on the blood of the very people who invented the concept of sleeping in. Each morning, you wake up with a constellation of mysterious bites, and the deep suspicion that the bugs are forming their own House of Lords between your mattress seams. If you ever wondered why everyone in old portraits looks vaguely annoyed, it's probably because their legs are itchy, and they can't scratch without violating the rules of portrait etiquette. And then there's the smell. A Regency bedroom smells like a complicated mix of perfume, human, and whatever happens when old feathers meet humid air. Potpourri bowls desperately try to mask the scent, but by midnight the room always reverts to its natural state, something between museum and wet bird. Open windows are only for show. Actually using them would let in fresh air and, heaven forbid, even more wildlife. The cleaning rituals are elaborate, at least in theory. Each morning, a battalion of servants descends to fluff, shake, and, in extreme cases, beat the bedding until the room is a snow globe of displaced dust and feathers. You watch this happen from a safe distance, sipping chocolate and pretending not to see the small avalanche of crumbs and hairpins tumbling to the floor. Despite it all, you are expected to emerge every morning with glowing skin and boundless energy. The truth, of course, is that you've spent the night fighting for your life against unseen enemies. Lumps, pests, odd smells, and a kind of existential dread that only comes from knowing your mattress is older than most European treaties. Still, when morning comes and the sun slants across your ridiculous pile of bedding, you can't help but feel grateful. Sure, you may have acquired 3 new itches and a sudden distrust of pillows, but you're rich, you're alive, and you have a servant on standby with fresh linens and even fresher gossip. In the end, the Regency bedchamber is an absurd, beautiful paradox, part palace, part wildlife preserve, comfort or health hazard, maybe a little of both. But tonight, as you sink into the embroidered abyss, just remember, it beats sleeping in the stables. Probably. There are so many servants bustling around that you've started assigning them numbers instead of names. You're not entirely sure what half of them do, but you suspect at least one is employed solely to dust your decorative teacup collection. Without them, you'd be forced to confront your own laundry. The horror! From the moment you crack an eyelid, your day is orchestrated by an invisible workforce operating with the precision and secrecy of a minor intelligence agency. There's the valet, who appears every morning like a well-tailored ghost, carrying your freshly pressed breeches and managing your wardrobe as though every waistcoat could spark a diplomatic incident. The lady's maid, with an encyclopedic memory for hairdos and emotional breakdowns, glides through your chamber, offering a hairpin with the seriousness of a field surgeon. Downstairs, the butler, majestic, mysterious, possibly able to stop time, runs the household with a mixture of military efficiency and mild disappointment. His domain is the dining room and the wine cellar, where bottles are guarded with more care than family secrets. If you ever lose him, simply listen for the faint sound of keys jingling and the sigh of someone realizing the family silver has been moved again. The housekeeper, meanwhile, is the undisputed queen of the corridors. She possesses a key ring large enough to anchor a small boat, and the kind of gaze that can silence a room full of footmen with a single arched eyebrow. Her knowledge of household drama is matched only by her ability to spot dust in total darkness. She's not just keeping the place clean, she's maintaining the fragile peace between the laundry maids and the kitchen staff, who, for reasons lost to history, have been locked in a centuries-long turf war over the back stairs. In the kitchens, the cook reigns supreme, wielding a wooden spoon with more authority than most minor nobility. Breakfast appears, disappears, and is replaced with astonishing speed and very little explanation. The scullery maid, meanwhile, scrubs pots and dreams of a future where her hands are not permanently pruned. And then there are the invisible legions, footmen in matching livery who materialize whenever a door needs opening, chambermaids who manage the endless war against mysterious stains, and the coachman who has never once smiled. You begin to suspect that there are more staff living in your house than members of your actual family, and yet, every time you misplace a glove, it vanishes into a void, only accessible by people holding feather dusters. Let's not forget the specialist roles. The lamplighter, who tiptoes through the house at dusk like a candlelit ninja. The gardener, whose sole purpose seems to be losing your petunias and growing prize-winning leeks. The stable hands, who care for the horses as though they are made of solid gold. Even the humble boot boy, quietly polishing away the sins of last night's escapades, plays his part in this grand production. Your main responsibility as master or mistress of the house, try not to trip over anyone. Occasionally you are required to issue vague aristocratic orders. See to the windows, polish something. But mostly you try not to look too startled when an unfamiliar servant bows at you from a shadowy hallway. You get the uneasy feeling the servants are better informed about your schedule than you are. Case in point, once, after mentioning a craving for scones, you were presented with 3 varieties by breakfast, one of which had your initials baked into it. You're not saying the staff can read your mind, but you wouldn't bet against it. You do wonder, in quiet moments, who's really in charge, because while you float from breakfast to stroll to afternoon nap, the servants are the ones spinning the world beneath your feet, keeping everything running, everyone fed, and ensuring you never have to learn how the laundry mangle actually works. The entire estate is a human clock, wound and maintained by people who could, if so inclined, overthrow you with nothing but a mop and a muttered word in the right ear. In the end, you come to accept the truth. You may have the title, the inheritance, and the decorative teacups, but it's the servants who truly run the show. And if you're lucky, they'll let you believe otherwise, at least until you try to make your own bed. Forget showers. It's all about the tepid sponge bath, performed with surgical precision and a strong tolerance for awkward eye contact. Soap is optional. Perfume is mandatory. You'll emerge cleaner, sort of, but smelling like a scented candle left out in the rain. The morning wash is a ritual that's equal parts hygiene and high drama. There's no piping hot cascade of water to soothe you awake, only a porcelain basin filled with yesterday's water, refreshed with a modest trickle of something only slightly above freezing. The maid stands by, holding a sponge and a towel with a resigned expression that says, "We're both going to pretend this is normal." You stand, shivering in your dressing gown, while she dips the sponge and begins dabbing at your neck and wrists, careful not to disturb your carefully constructed bed hair. The goal isn't so much clean as less noticeably dusty. Any truly ambitious attempt at cleanliness, a full-body bath for example, requires hours of labour, 2 burly footmen to haul buckets of water up the stairs, and a letter of permission from your physician. Thus the sponge reigns supreme, and your dignity takes a back seat. Soap, when it appears, is a rare and precious guest. It's often homemade, lumpy, and suspiciously scented, with undertones of last season's lavender and a faint note of sheep. But don't get used to it. Too much scrubbing is believed to open your pores to the evils of the outside world, and nobody wants to be accused of reckless cleanliness. Instead, you pat yourself dry with an embroidered towel and move to the next step, the cloud of perfume. This is where the real magic happens. There's an art to Regency fragrance, a fine line between alluring and why does the drawing room smell like a funeral? You dab rose water on your wrists, sprinkle violet water across your collarbones, and brace yourself for the final assault. A generous spritz of something with enough musk to stun a medium-sized boar. This scent, you are assured, is the very peak of sophistication. It's also the only thing standing between you and the collective nose of the breakfast table. Grooming isn't just about fragrance. Hair must be brushed to glossy perfection, and teeth? Well, let's not get carried away. A quick scrub with a twig or a dab of charcoal is as close as you'll get to dental hygiene. You rinse your mouth with a stringent mouthwash that tastes like despair and raw herbs, then smile and hope your wealth distracts from your breath. For men, shaving is a minor ordeal. Your valet stands ready with a straight razor and a steady hand, and you try not to flinch as he navigates the delicate landscape of your chin. If you're unlucky, you'll emerge with a small nick and a large piece of tissue stuck to your jaw. Women have their own trials, plucking stray hairs, smoothing wild brows, and pinching their cheeks to fake a healthy glow. Both genders must suffer the ignominy of patchy spots, the result of a hurried sponge and a lack of natural sunlight. The whole process takes far longer than it should, and yet somehow you still feel as though you've missed a spot, possibly several, but there's no time to linger. The day's schedule is relentless, and there are already 3 people outside your door waiting to debate the day's wardrobe. You take one last look in the mirror, adjusting your dressing gown, smoothing your hair, and inhaling deeply. You smell like an over-perfumed bouquet and look like someone who's just been startled by cold water and their own reflection. But you are, by the standards of Regency England, freshly washed and ready to face the world. As you sweep into the hall, the scent of rose and bergamot trailing behind you like a nervous ghost, you can rest assured you are the very image of aristocratic cleanliness. Or at least, you're cleaner than yesterday. And in this era, that's considered a triumph. Getting dressed is less about self-expression and more about surviving a high-stakes game of sartorial Jenga. Silk stockings, breeches, waistcoats, cravats, and an overcoat that could double as a circus tent. You'll need a full staff, a strategic mind, and at least 3 hours to make it to breakfast fully clothed. The day's first real challenge is standing still while your valet or lady's maid eyes you up and down like a general inspecting the troops. They are not here for your opinions. They have a vision, a grand, layered and unreasonably tight vision that will be achieved, even if it means physically stuffing you into your breeches while humming a threatening lullaby. The room is filled with the gentle swoosh of linen, the soft clink of cufflinks, and the growing suspicion that, beneath all this finery, you are rapidly losing circulation. First come the undergarments, which is already an ordeal. For men, it's linen drawers and a thin, slightly scratchy undershirt. For women, it's chemises and corsets that require 2 people and a strong belief in the afterlife. The maid pulls the laces with the seriousness of someone raising a ship's anchor, while you grasp the bedpost and attempt to remember what breathing felt like. The corset is not just support, it's a lifestyle, and by the 3rd tug you are experiencing a new spiritual connection to your ribs. Next are the stockings. They're impossibly smooth, silk if you're lucky, wool if you've annoyed the laundry staff. Getting them on is like wrestling with a slippery eel, except the eel is aristocratic, delicate, and will gossip about you for weeks if you snag it. Once your legs are swaddled, the breeches appear. Breeches are designed with one purpose: to humble you. Too tight and you'll walk like you're wading through quicksand. Too loose, and the butler will raise an eyebrow so sharp it could slice a melon. Now, the waistcoat, a garment that's simultaneously decorative and, in the wrong hands, a medieval straitjacket. Buttons run from belly to sternum, each one a minor crisis if you're in a hurry. The pattern must be just so. Floral for the daring, stripes for the cautious, brocade for the wildly optimistic. Women face their own mountain of layers: petticoats, under petticoats, outer petticoats, and the gown itself, with sleeves that could conceal a family of ferrets and skirts so wide they require their own gravitational field. But wait, there's more. No ensemble is complete without the cravat, a strip of fabric that functions as both a necktie and a test of your patience. Tying it is a minor art form. There are diagrams, there are how-to pamphlets, there are even, if you're desperate, actual human beings whose sole purpose is to fold, knot, and poof your cravat until you look like you have a small, fashionable pillow attached to your throat. Too tight, and you risk fainting during morning prayers. Too loose, and your aunt will write about it in her next letter to the vicar. By this point, the room is a battlefield of discarded garments, pins, and personal dignity. Your staff hover nearby, offering sage advice and unsolicited opinions on colour coordination. You realise you've been standing here for the better part of an hour, and you're still not technically dressed. Now comes the coat, part armour, part billboard. It's heavy, tailored, and gives you the posture of a military statue. For women, the final gown is lowered over your head with the gravity of a religious ceremony. Accessories are next. Buckled shoes polished to a blinding shine, jewelled hairpins, watch chains, fans, gloves, and, if you're feeling ambitious, a snuff box or 2. You're now dressed, technically, but movement is a calculated risk. Sitting down, dangerous. Reaching for a muffin requires an advanced degree in textile engineering. By the time you finally make it to breakfast, you're sweating, exhausted, and nursing a mild cravat-induced headache. You've survived the ultimate trial of the Regency elite, getting dressed, and as you take your seat, you silently pray that the fashion gods will spare you any surprise costume changes before supper. Your morning meal is less about nutrition and more about asserting dominance over the lower classes via soft-boiled eggs and mountains of toast. You sip chocolate or tea, surrounded by relatives silently judging your marmalade-spreading technique. It's the most stressful meal of the day. Breakfast in Regency England is not the casual pop-tart-in-the-car affair you know today. It's a highly choreographed display of wealth, decorum and emotional endurance, all set to the soundtrack of ticking clocks and the faint clatter of the silverware. You don't simply roll out of bed and grab a coffee. You descend a grand staircase like a minor royal, clutching the banister for support as your shoes try to murder your feet one slippery step at a time. The dining room is a stage. The table stretches so far you could launch a small naval vessel down the centre. Starched linens glow in the morning light, and the plates are so delicate you're afraid to breathe on them. Place settings are a minefield of forks, knives, and mysterious spoons. Your main goal is not to eat, but to avoid making a fool of yourself before noon. Servants drift around like well-dressed ghosts, refilling cups and presenting dishes with the gravitas usually reserved for religious rituals. The butler, upright and omnipresent, supervises the affair as if it's the Treaty of Versailles. One wrong move, a clumsy drop of the napkin, a buttered roll that escapes onto the carpet, and you'll be remembered at family gatherings for the next decade as the one who couldn't manage a crumpet. As for the food, it's less grab and go and more take your time or risk social ruin. There are soft-boiled eggs, balanced delicately in porcelain cups, waiting to be decapitated with military precision. Toast arrives in towers, cold by the time it reaches you, and accompanied by at least 3 varieties of jam, all with labels in illegible French. There's kedgeree, a dish involving rice, fish, and presumably regret, kidneys for the brave, and enough butter to clog the arteries of an entire parish. Drinks are a declaration of personality. Tea is for the pious, coffee for the cosmopolitan, and hot chocolate, a thick syrupy luxury for the unapologetically decadent. The chocolate is so rich that it leaves a film on your lips, a subtle badge of honour for the truly wealthy. If you spill it, you might as well move to Scotland and change your name. Conversation, meanwhile, is a game of social chess. No topic is truly safe, but everyone tries their best. The weather, always terrible. The neighbours, worse. And if you're feeling bold, news from London. Every statement is a careful manoeuvre, every smile a subtle warning. You monitor your relatives' faces as you reach for the marmalade. Too much enthusiasm and you'll be accused of gluttony. Too little, and Aunt Eugenia will write home that you're ill. Breakfast is also the official start to the day's rumour mill. There's a particular cadence to Regency gossip. First, a cautious question, did you hear? Then a collective leaning in, followed by an eruption of whispered speculation about Lady So-and-so's hair, or the mysterious visitor seen outside the apothecary at dawn. You learn to eat quietly and chew slowly, lest you miss the delicious details. But for all the ritual, anxiety and peril, there's something oddly comforting about the predictability of it all. The soft scrape of a spoon against an egg, the scent of warm bread and sharp orange peel, the flicker of candlelight glinting off the family silver. It's as if the chaos of the outside world can be kept at bay for a little while by sheer force of custom and cholesterol. By the end, you've navigated a gauntlet of etiquette, emerged mostly unscathed, and achieved the day's first and greatest victory, breakfast without scandal. You dab your lips, share a knowing glance with the butler, and mentally prepare for the far less terrifying ordeal of, heaven help you, making small talk in the drawing room. Siblings, cousins, and that one aunt who may or may not be actively plotting your downfall. Breakfast is a battlefield of etiquette, gossip, and passive-aggressive remarks disguised as concern for your constitution. Somehow you survive, just barely. The table is set with military precision, but the real action happens above the linen, through sharp glances, coded sighs, and a volley of carefully chosen words. You've barely taken your seat before the interrogations begin, delivered with the gentle touch of a velvet hammer. "Did you sleep well, dear?" your mother asks in a tone that suggests she's heard rumours to the contrary. Siblings exchange knowing looks, silently wagering on whether you'll confess to sneaking that extra scone last night. Cousins gather at the far end of the table, already whispering about who danced with whom at last week's assembly. Your youngest brother kicks you under the table, a silent plea to please pass the jam and please don't mention the frog incident from yesterday. On your right, your eldest sister sits ramrod straight, sipping her tea as if it contains the secrets to social dominance. She asks about your plans for the day, but what she really wants to know is whether you're about to embarrass the family with another impromptu poetry recital. Then there's Aunt Gertrude, a living legend in family circles. She adjusts her lace cap, leans in, and surveys you with the cold calculation of a general planning a siege. Her questions are subtle traps. Do you find the country air invigorating? You look a bit pale. Translation. You look suspiciously tired for someone with nothing of importance to do. No one in the family delivers a backhanded compliment quite like Aunt Gertrude. It's a gift, one you'd gladly regift if possible. Uncle Bertrand, meanwhile, lurks behind the broadsheet, occasionally grunting in agreement with whoever is winning the conversational scrum. His main function seems to be shielding himself from any topic more controversial than the weather. He'll nod supportively at anyone, as long as it keeps him from being drawn into an actual discussion about estate management, marriage prospects, or, heaven forbid, politics. There is, of course, the matter of the family fortune. Every conversation inevitably circles back to money, inheritance, and who is most likely to marry well. Your cousin Letitia launches into an enthusiastic monologue about her suitor's extensive land holdings, while your brother quietly checks the silverware for the family crest, just to make sure nothing has mysteriously migrated into your pocket. The conversation ebbs and flows, a tide of half-truths, subtle jabs, and not-so-subtle boasting. Someone always brings up a family scandal from 2 generations ago, hoping it'll distract from this morning's more pressing indiscretions. Do you remember Cousin Lionel's disastrous elopement? Someone will say, as if the mere mention of Lionel can shift the spotlight away from their own latest escapade. Amid all this, you attempt to eat your eggs in peace, navigating the treacherous waters of familial affection and rivalry. If you're clever, you offer vague, non-committal answers and keep your eyes firmly on your plate. If you're less clever, you'll be volunteered for an afternoon of charitable visiting with the vicar's wife, a fate worse than exile. Despite the undercurrent of competition, there is a strange comfort in the routine. The rhythm of the family's bickering is as familiar as the ticking of the grandfather clock. Your youngest sibling will inevitably spill something, your cousin will try to sneak a third crumpet, and Aunt Gertrude will declare, again, that standards simply aren't what they used to be. By the end of the meal, you're left marvelling at the sheer stamina required to survive breakfast with your relatives. You mop up the last of your jam, exchange exhausted glances with your siblings, and make a silent pact to avoid any important conversations until at least tea time. In Regency England, family breakfasts aren't just about food. They're a masterclass in diplomacy, endurance, and the subtle art of pretending not to hear your name when the words responsibility or marriage are uttered, and as you push back from the table, you breathe a quiet sigh of relief. You made it through another morning without starting a scandal, for now. Before noon, you must be seen taking the air. This involves dressing up, parading around the estate, and pretending to appreciate nature while secretly competing with the neighbours over whose peacocks are fluffier. Sometimes you walk so far, you need a nap just to recover from the exertion. The Regency Morning Stroll is not about fitness. It is not even about fresh air, which everyone agrees is only moderately safe in small quantities. No, the morning walk is about one thing and one thing only: optics. It's your chance to be admired, envied, or at the very least, politely acknowledged from a distance. After all, what's the point of inheriting acres of perfectly trimmed lawn if nobody sees you wandering aimlessly across it, squinting artistically into the sunlight? First, there's the matter of attire. No one simply steps outside. For men, this means a tailored morning coat, gleaming boots, a cravat so complicated it requires its own set of instructions, and a hat perched at a mathematically improbable angle. Women are trussed into walking dresses, gloves, bonnets festooned with enough ribbon to secure a fleet of ships, and a parasol for deflecting both sun and unsolicited opinions. You are less a pedestrian, more a mobile exhibit of high fashion and inherited money. The estate becomes your stage. Each gravel path, rose arbour, and ornamental pond is an opportunity to be seen, ideally while laughing at nothing in particular, or pausing thoughtfully to sniff a flower you are mildly allergic to. Servants are strategically stationed at intervals, ready to admire your progress and offer the illusion of spontaneous applause. Sometimes you wave magnanimously at the gardener, who is forbidden by ancient tradition from making eye contact. Of course, you are not alone. The neighbours are out too, having synchronised their own morning strolls to maximise chances of accidental encounters. You engage in a highly competitive form of slow-motion catwalk. One neighbour boasts a new marble fountain, another has acquired a rare black swan that appears to be plotting something unspeakable. The true arms race, however, is fought with peacocks. These birds, universally regarded as the living embodiment of smugness, are meticulously groomed, paraded, and, if rumours are true, sometimes bribed with raisins to display their full fan of feathers exactly as guests pass by. All the while, conversation remains breezily insincere. "What a delightful morning," someone remarks, even as clouds threaten rain, and a light breeze attempts to snatch your hat. "The roses are especially robust this year," another neighbour offers, as if robust roses are the ultimate measure of family success. Every topic is coded. A comment about the unfortunate weather might really mean "I saw your cousin leave the card room at 2 a.m, and any compliment on your shrubbery is almost certainly a veiled jab at last year's pruning disaster. Then there's the exertion. Regency fitness is a delicate dance between social obligation and genuine effort. You amble from the ha-ha, a ditch with better PR, to the folly, a structure with no purpose except to impress guests, and finally to the lake, which no one has ever actually swum in. If by misfortune your walk extends past a certain threshold, let's say, 3 consecutive flower beds, you're entitled, by law and tradition, to complain of fatigue and request a restorative snack. You may even feign a dizzy spell, which earns you both a seat in the shade and the admiration of onlookers for knowing your limits. At last, after one lap of the grounds, a polite exchange of shallow compliments, and a silent contest of whose dog is fluffier, you can retreat indoors. You've survived another stroll, preserved your reputation, and almost convinced yourself that you enjoyed nature. Almost. In Regency England, the morning walk isn't exercise. It's theatre, it's politics, it's the ongoing quest to out-peacock the competition. And if you're clever, you'll arrange for the butler to have your favourite chair and a small cake, waiting by the window for your triumphant, exhausted return. With hours to fill and absolutely nothing productive to do, you master the art of killing time. Card games, embroidery, and the thrilling sport of listening to a cousin read poetry aloud until everyone's spirit leaves their body. Occasionally you fake a headache to escape. This is Regency leisure. A long, languid stretch of day where the clock seems to have joined you in doing absolutely nothing of consequence. You settle into the drawing room, a cavernous space furnished with sofas that look inviting but are secretly engineered to encourage good posture and prevent actual napping. Sunlight filters in through layers of lace curtains, illuminating motes of dust and the faint outline of a portrait ancestor whose main achievement appears to be surviving this much free time without taking up competitive yodeling. The first challenge is choosing your entertainment. If you're lucky, someone will suggest cards, a safe, predictable way to pass the hours without having to form a single original thought. Whist is the reigning champion, a game so calm and repetitive that you can play an entire round while composing a grocery list in your head. The stakes are low, unless you count pride, which everyone here does, but the tension is high. No one wants to be the first to play the wrong suit, or admit they don't understand the rules, which have changed 3 times since breakfast. For those not drawn to the thrill of shuffled decks, there is embroidery. The ladies gather, silks and needles in hand, pretending to work diligently while actually trading whispered gossip. A well-executed satin stitch is less important than a well-placed rumour about who wore the wrong colour to last week's supper. If you're feeling bold, you might attempt a sampler, knowing full well that future generations will wonder why all your birds look mildly terrified. Inevitably, someone produces a book of poetry. It's always a cousin, always earnest, and always convinced that everyone wants to hear a dramatic recitation of Wordsworth. You brace yourself as she clears her throat, holding your teacup steady as your soul gently floats away on a sea of drowsy iambic pentameter. Eyelids droop. Someone in the back of the room begins to quietly knit faster, channeling all their existential frustration into the world's tightest scarf. You consider feigning a coughing fit, but your aunt has a sixth sense for malingering. If the weather is fine and boredom becomes too dangerous, the party may attempt an indoor game, charades, blind man's bluff, or the ever-popular guess which relative is hiding the sherry. These games are best approached with the understanding that cheating is not just allowed, but required for anyone hoping to keep their sanity. Laughter bubbles up, polite and restrained, but underneath is the collective plea for something, anything, to happen. Even the family dog, recruited as a teammate, looks like he's reconsidering his life choices. For the men, a diversion might involve a strategic retreat to the billiard room, where the main event is complaining about the felt on the table and discussing the recent price of hay. If things are truly desperate, someone might even suggest a walk in the garden, which is universally agreed upon to be slightly less tedious than listening to Cousin Miranda attempt another sonnet. By late afternoon, you find yourself staring out the window, counting carriages, or making up elaborate backstories for passing crows. Time stretches, warps, and occasionally doubles back on itself as you watch the hands of the clock creep toward tea, salvation, and a fleeting excuse for actual conversation. In Regency England, boredom is an art form, refined, practiced, and performed with dignity. You're not just enduring it, you're perfecting it. And when you finally escape to your room, you do so quietly, nobly, with the knowledge that you've survived another round of parlour games and polite nothingness, until tomorrow when it starts all over again. Writing letters is both an art and a weapon. You'll spend half the morning crafting passive-aggressive notes, then another hour sealing them with enough wax to start a small fire. Every letter is a gamble. Will your latest quip be the talk of the ton, or will you be socially exiled to the countryside? The Regency letter-writing hour is a daily ritual not for the faint of heart. It begins with a stack of crisp stationery, monogrammed and scented, hopefully with lavender and not last week's herring pie, and a quill so sharp it could draw blood if you so much as look at it sideways. Servants deliver bundles of correspondence with the seriousness of royal couriers, their faces betraying nothing of the drama contained within. There's a pile for you. Invitations, replies, warnings about Cousin Felicity's little mishap at the assembly, and at least one mysterious envelope with a wax seal from someone you'd hoped had moved to Scotland. Seated at your escritoire, you gather your arsenal: ink, sand, sealing wax, and a set of rhetorical daggers honed through years of social sparring. The first order of business, responding to Aunt Hortense, whose note combines family news with a masterclass in guilt-tripping. "It has been so long since we heard from you," she writes, "and I do hope you're not too busy to remember your poor relations in Derbyshire." You reply with a flourish, offering just enough warmth to satisfy her, but not enough to inspire a week-long visit. Then there are the invitations. So many invitations. Every ball, card party, and charity bazaar is another opportunity for someone to see you, judge your outfit, and quietly note your seating arrangement. Declining is a delicate operation. Too abrupt and you'll be branded haughty. Too enthusiastic, and you might accidentally find yourself committed to hosting a poetry reading for the Ladies Improving Society. The real thrill, however, is the gossip. Every letter carries the seeds of scandal, watered liberally with hints and flourishes. Did you hear about Lord Pembroke's unfortunate incident with the duck pond? You write to your confidant, knowing your words will ripple through parlours and tea tables from Mayfair to Bath. Correspondence is the Regency internet. Nothing is true until it's written, and nothing is forgotten once it's delivered. You write with the care of a surgeon, weaving compliments with gentle insults, concern with calculated ambiguity. Lady A's new hairstyle is so daring. I never would have thought of placing ostrich feathers there, but she does have such a creative spirit. Your pen moves quickly, but your mind races. Every phrase is weighed, every anecdote polished until it sparkles or stings. There's a whole lexicon of subtlety. Interesting means hideous, spirited means mildly unhinged, and improving means someone is in desperate need of a miracle. Once the letters are written, it's time for the pageantry of sealing. Wax melts onto the flap, drips onto your finger, every single time, and you press your seal with the authority of a monarch bestowing a knighthood. The smell of singed hair is the scent of victory. You admire your handiwork, then watch as the footman whisks your correspondence away, already plotting the replies and reactions that will roll in by tomorrow morning. Every letter you send is a roll of the dice. Will your latest joke land? Will your sarcasm be mistaken for sincerity? Will you be the toast of the drawing room, or worse, left off the next guest list entirely? Only time will tell. And so you sit, flexing ink-stained fingers and pondering your next move. Because in Regency England, words have weight, wax seals have power, and every little note could be the beginning of your greatest triumph, or your swift social demise. Nothing says status like popping over to another mansion to inspect someone else's wallpaper and judge their tea service. This involves more outfit changes, more servants, and a risk of accidental social faux pas, like calling Lady Featherstone's prized pug Chunky. Preparing for a Regency social call is a full-scale military operation disguised as polite leisure. You might imagine that after breakfast and the obligatory morning stroll, you'd have earned a rest. But society waits for no one, especially not someone still wearing their breakfast cravat. The first sign the day's visits are about to commence is the sudden materialization of half your household staff, arms full of clothing, shoes, hats, and something that might be a parasol or possibly an experimental weather balloon. The outfit change is non-negotiable. Morning dress is suitable for breakfast and idle indoor pursuits, but never for being seen in public, even if public just means Lady Fortescue's drawing room 4 doors down. Your valet or maid, already halfway through their second cup of tea, briskly strips away your earlier efforts and begins assembling a new wardrobe. For men, this means a fresh cravat, different colour, equally confusing to tie, a coat with slightly more buttons, and boots polished to such a shine that you could use them to signal ships at sea. Women's attire, of course, is a Rubik's Cube of new petticoats, a different dress, not the muslin, the other muslin, and a bonnet designed to both impress and, ideally, prevent sunburns and unwanted conversation. There's a strategy to visiting hours. Arriving too early risks catching your hosts in dishabille, a social disaster. Too late, and you're labelled fashionably unreliable, which in Regency code is only slightly better than outright villainy. Servants are dispatched ahead with calling cards, an elaborate business card system that lets everyone know who is visiting whom, who's not at home, sometimes very much on purpose, and who must now scramble to produce fresh cakes and act delighted by your sudden arrival. The journey itself is a trial. Your carriage, a rolling status symbol, is dusted off, horses harnessed and footmen placed in formation. If the weather's fine, you may opt to walk, which gives you a chance to parade your latest hat and feign surprise when you accidentally bump into your neighbour en route, who, astonishingly, is also dressed to the nines for a quick trip to the fishmonger. Upon arrival, there are more servants. An entire subculture exists just below the surface, silently judging your punctuality, your footwear, and the quality of your calling card paper. If you make it inside, you are shown to the drawing room where your host, equally uncomfortable in their own new outfit, greets you with the formal enthusiasm of someone about to undergo minor surgery. The visit itself is a delicate dance of compliments, carefully orchestrated small talk and surreptitious glances at the furniture. You comment on the curtains, admire the portrait of an ancestor with unsettling eyebrows, and praise the new tea blend, all while avoiding the treacherous ground of gossip, unless, of course, your host brings up Lady Featherstone's pug first. Then, and only then, do you risk a comment about his robust constitution. You remain just long enough to appear genuinely interested, but not so long that you're offered a second cup of tea, which means you've overstayed your welcome. With a final compliment on the hydrangeas and a subtle check to make sure your gloves haven't vanished into the sofa, you make your exit. By the time you return home, you're both exhausted and triumphant. Another visit survived, another day's worth of social expectations met, and all without insulting anyone's dog. In Regency England, that's considered a resounding success. Tiny cakes, suspiciously small sandwiches, and the ongoing struggle to look elegant while eating a scone the size of your head. Tea is where reputations are made, broken, or drowned in a puddle of spilled Darjeeling. Afternoon tea in Regency. England is not just a meal, it's a live performance with porcelain props, dainty pastries, and social reputations, balanced on the edge of a sterling silver knife. The ritual begins with a parade of teapots, one for every conceivable blend, each poured with the seriousness of a priest handling holy water. The tea itself is poured from heights that border on athletic, aiming for the elusive sweet spot between elegant cascade and scalded lap. Conversation, meanwhile, bubbles along as steadily as the steaming cups, and you quickly realise this is less about refreshment and more about surviving a three-ring circus of social acrobatics. First, there's the cake dilemma. An array of desserts beckons, Battenberg, Petits fours, and slices of something so dense with dried fruit it could be used as a doorstop. The scones, fluffy and imposing, challenge even the bravest guest. Should you attempt to cut yours open, or break it by hand? Will the cream go first or the jam? There are factions, loyalists on either side, watching with thinly veiled judgment. The wrong move, and you risk becoming the subject of a whispered post-tea analysis. Did you see the way she slathered her scone? Next come the sandwiches. Cucumber, watercress, and egg. Each so insubstantial you could eat a dozen and still feel faint. They are stacked in precarious towers, crusts trimmed with military precision, and filled so sparingly you wonder if the kitchen is holding back out of spite. Picking one up without scattering crumbs everywhere is the Regency equivalent of a trust exercise. One false move and you're dabbing frantically at your lap while the entire room pretends not to notice. Conversation at tea is a delicate balancing act. 1 part genuine inquiry, 2 parts calculated risk. You're expected to inquire after everyone's health, while avoiding mention of the unfortunate rash your cousin picked up in Bath, and express polite interest in the latest charity bazaar or local theatre production. At the same time, your ears perked for the slightest whiff of scandal. Lady Witherspoon's new companion, Lord Darnley's late-night carriage ride, the mysterious absence of plum cake from the table, each is fair game for speculation, provided it's done in a tone of casual, disinterested amusement. Tea is also a test of poise. You hold your cup just so, pinky angled for maximum effect, even as your arm slowly goes numb. Pouring milk before or after the tea is a controversial subject best avoided, unless you're looking to start a philosophical debate. Every gesture is scrutinised, every laugh measured. Dropping a spoon is grounds for a brief silent prayer. Accidentally knocking over a sugar bowl is the kind of event that makes it into family lore, retold at gatherings for decades. Amid all this, the servants move with quiet efficiency, refilling cups, replenishing sandwiches, and clearing crumbs with a flick so smooth it seems choreographed. You envy their calm as you desperately try to remember which plate is yours and whether you've already greeted Lady Digby or only dreamed about it. By the end, you've survived more than just a snack. You've navigated the etiquette of scones, sidestepped conversational traps, and resisted the urge to eat an entire cake out of sheer nervous energy. As you stand to leave, you give yourself a silent round of applause. You didn't spill anything, insult anyone's jam placement, or choke on a sandwich. In Regency England, afternoon tea is a battlefield disguised as a bakery, and every day you leave with your reputation intact is a victory worth savouring, one crumb at a time. You flirt with fans, lock eyes across crowded rooms, and try not to faint when someone touches your gloved hand. Courtship is a strategic operation, equal parts romantic tension and cutthroat competition. One wrong word, and you're doomed to a lifetime of awkward encounters at country balls. In Regency England, the art of courtship is less about love and more about surviving a minefield of social protocols with your dignity and inheritance intact. The day's festivities might be nominally about tea, dancing, or poetry, but beneath every polite interaction is an undercurrent of calculation. You are at all times simultaneously trying to secure a future and avoid public humiliation. The stakes? Only your heart, your fortune, and the likelihood of being forced to marry your cousin from Cornwall. It all begins with a glance. A well-timed meeting of the eyes across a ballroom can launch a dozen whispered rumours and at least one hastily convened family council. You must be subtle. Linger too long and you're branded forward. Too short and your intentions vanish like unbuttered toast. A flick of a fan, a hint of a smile, these are your tools, honed sharper than any duelling pistol. For men, the challenge is to look interested but not desperate, chivalrous but not predatory, well off but not too well off, lest you attract a swarm of matchmaking mothers eager to offload their most opinionated daughters. The next manoeuvre is conversation. You approach, heart pounding, palms slightly clammy, and attempt to start a dialogue using only the most rigidly approved topics. The weather, the most recent assembly, and if you're feeling bold, the relative quality of local sheep. Each word is a step in a delicate dance, and one misstep, a joke too sharp, a compliment too direct, a reference to politics, can send your hopes crashing. You remember, too late, that last season's most eligible bachelor was banished to Wales after an ill-timed remark about the vicar's wig. Physical contact is another hazardous frontier. Forget about stolen kisses in moonlit gardens. In Regency England, the light brush of a gloved fingertip during a quadrille is enough to send shockwaves through an entire household. Shoulders brush during a country dance, and suddenly you're on the receiving end of knowing glances from every chaperone within 20 yards. If your fingers linger for even a heartbeat too long, you might as well start picking out matching sets of silverware. After all, everyone knows that accidental hand-holding is the gateway to elopement, and, in extreme cases, poetry. Of course, no discussion of courtship would be complete without the ever-present spectre of competition. For every eligible suitor, there are at least 4 rivals, each more charming, better connected, or more suspiciously enthusiastic about embroidery than the last. Allies are made and broken with the speed of a passing carriage, and alliances can hinge on something as trivial as a misplaced compliment, or the rumour that you once spilled punch on your own shoes. At the centre of it all are the parents, hovering at the edge of every room, armed with steely resolve and a comprehensive knowledge of family trees. They steer you towards suitable matches, whispering reminders about dowries, connections, and the mysterious good breeding that seems to involve an affinity for horses and a complete lack of personality. Every conversation you have is weighed, measured, and, most importantly, reported back to at least 3 relatives by breakfast. Surviving Regency courtship is a victory in itself. By the end of the season, you've dodged the worst conversational pitfalls, escaped the clutches of your most enthusiastic admirers, and maybe, just maybe, exchanged a secret smile with someone who makes the endless dances, dinners, and chaperoned strolls almost worth it. And if you didn't faint, cause a scandal, or get caught passing notes behind a fern, then you, my friend, are already ahead of the game. In Regency England, love may be a battlefield, but it's one where the best-dressed soldier and the wittiest usually wins. Every movement, every word, every eyebrow raise, dictated by rules older than your butler. Etiquette books multiply like rabbits, and you live in constant fear of using the wrong fork. Social ruin is always one napkin slip away. From the moment you could toddle across the nursery floor, etiquette has been the most dreaded part of your daily routine. There is a system for everything. How to greet a Viscount, 2 steps, slight bow, avoid eye contact with his cravat, when to speak, never first, and what to say, absolutely nothing of substance. Your governess's bookshelf groans under the weight of tomes with titles like The Complete Manual of Regency Manners and On the Artful Use of the Soup Spoon. You suspect that, left unchecked, these books would soon overrun the house, like ivy, if ivy could critique your posture and demand you address the footman with sufficient gravity. Every morning, etiquette practice begins promptly after breakfast. You stand ramrod straight in the drawing room, balancing a heavy book atop your head as your instructor surveys you like a disappointed falcon. The lessons cover everything from walking gracefully, heel, toe, glide, never clomp, to sitting like a gentle person, which apparently requires you to contort your spine into a shape last seen in architectural sketches of Gothic cathedrals. Then come the handkerchief drills. How to produce one discreetly, from the left sleeve, never the right. How to dab your nose without appearing to have a nose at all. And most importantly, how to feint elegantly if the conversation turns to anything as shocking as politics, childbirth, or the price of turnips. Your cousin famously swooned at the mere mention of Napoleon's hat, and was considered the height of good breeding for a full week. Conversation is an etiquette minefield. You practice polite phrases in front of the mirror. How charming indeed. And I must congratulate you on your most unique bonnet. Direct statements are discouraged. Instead, you learn the art of the gently implied insult, compliments that hover delicately between sincere and suspicious. Your aunt claims that with enough practice, you'll be able to wish someone a pleasant morning while questioning the legitimacy of their family crest. But the real danger comes at the dinner table. The cutlery arrangement alone resembles a tactical battle plan. 3 forks, 2 knives, a spoon shaped like a tiny canoe, and something called an asparagus server. Choose incorrectly, and you'll hear the sharp intake of breath from down the table, followed by the family's favourite sport, watching someone else flounder. Napkins, you discover, are their own source of peril. One false move, tucking it into your collar, folding it into a swan, or heaven forbid, dropping it on the floor, and your reputation will be in tatters before dessert. Even facial expressions are governed by unspoken laws. Too much enthusiasm and you're labelled vulgar. Too little and you're uninterested. A single poorly timed eyebrow raise can spark gossip faster than a spilled inkwell. Your younger brother once smiled broadly at the Countess of Derby and was banished to the children's table until further notice. Despite the stress, there's a certain satisfaction in mastering the endless rules. When you glide into a room with the right blend of grace and indifference, or you select the correct fish fork without hesitation, you can almost see your governess weeping with pride behind her teacup. And when you manage a perfect curtsy without toppling over, it feels like winning a gold medal at the Olympics, if the Olympics judged you solely on your ability to stand very still and not make eye contact. So you practice, you persevere, and you pray. Because in Regency England, etiquette is not just a set of rules, it's a survival strategy. And the price for a single mistake, only your social life, your family's legacy, and perhaps your right to ever eat pudding again. No pressure. You never touch a coin yourself, but the household accounts could fund a small war. Your daily expenses include shoes for the horses, lace for the curtains, and emergency funds for unexpected gambling losses. Debt is a fashionable accessory. Money in Regency England is an abstraction for the wealthy, a distant rumour wafting through drawing rooms, mentioned only when absolutely necessary and preferably in French. You have an allowance, a sum so large and vague that you assume it's calculated using a system of moon phases and the price of imported pineapples. Any mention of actual coins is beneath you. Your purse, if you even have one, contains perhaps a single shilling and a handful of peppermint lozenges for emergencies. The true heart of your finances beats in the accounts room, a shadowy domain ruled by the family steward. He is a man of mysterious talents, capable of making ledgers balance through sheer force of will and a slight intimidation of local tradesmen. You encounter him only rarely, usually when he appears in the hallway with a sheaf of bills and a polite, haunted expression. "If I might have a word, sir," he begins, and you instantly develop a pressing engagement elsewhere, anywhere, really, as long as it does not involve subtraction. The expenses, when you pause to notice, are staggering. There are the obvious costs: gowns from London, boots from Paris, hats that seem to multiply in the night. The horses require shoes, the coach needs repairing after the last minor accident with the duck pond, and the stables must be stocked with oats, hay, and the occasional emergency vet visit after an ill-advised midnight race. Then there are the invisible luxuries: lace for the curtains, changed with every season, new wallpaper for the breakfast room, because green is suddenly dreadfully last year, and candle wax by the ton. Lighting a home in the evening requires a full staff and a small forest's worth of tapers. You once considered keeping the lamps unlit to save money, but the family revolted at the suggestion, and your reputation as that miserly cousin took weeks to repair. Gambling is an inevitable hazard of high society. A night at the card table can end with your pride intact and your pockets empty, or, on one infamous occasion, with the deed to a cottage in Sussex changing hands over a disputed game of faro. No one actually pays their gambling debts on time. Doing so would be considered gauche, but the EOS circulate like social currency, their true value determined by gossip and the odds of a surprise inheritance. You keep a tidy sum in reserve for unexpected losses, as well as for the occasional bribe needed to keep certain stories out of the morning papers. Debt, in Regency England, is less a misfortune and more a conversational flourish. Everyone has it. Few admit it. Creditors send polite notes, which you ignore until they become less polite. Friends compare their mounting obligations as if discussing rare breeds of dog. "I owe Fortescue 2,000 for that unfortunate wager at Almack's. Someone will sigh, to which you reply, "Only 2,000? You're practically a pauper." The right kind of debt, owed to the right kind of person, can even enhance your social standing. Behind the glittering facade, however, anxiety lurks. The family fortune must be preserved for future generations, your ancestors remind you from their gloomy portraits. Estate income, trust funds, and the occasional windfall from a distant uncle all contribute to the delicate balance. When the steward does finally corner you, he presents the figures with the air of a priest delivering unwelcome prophecy. You nod gravely, resolve to economize, and immediately order 3 more waistcoats just in case. And so, the cycle continues. Money flows, bills accumulate, debts are shuffled like playing cards. You're the very picture of Regency prosperity, radiant, fashionable, and just slightly panicked every time the post arrives. But as long as you look the part, who's to say otherwise? After all, poverty is temporary, but embarrassment at the card table is forever. The only thing faster than a Regency carriage is gossip. A misplaced glance, a mysterious carriage at midnight, or an overly familiar butler, and suddenly you're the headline of every letter in London. Survival means playing the game or risking exile to Bath. To live among the wealthy in Regency England is to exist under a microscope, each movement dissected and magnified by a well-oiled rumour machine. From the grandest ballrooms to the humblest servant stairs, the currency of society isn't gold, it's information. If you haven't heard the latest scandal by breakfast, don't worry. By lunch, it will have found you, embroidered with fresh details and possibly a subplot involving a borrowed opera cloak. It begins innocently enough. Perhaps you're seen stepping out for an evening stroll, alone, or you linger a second too long in conversation with someone else's fiancé. Sometimes it's as simple as wearing last year's shade of blue. or being spotted at the cheese table more than once. It doesn't matter. The rumour mill grinds on, fed by the insatiable need for novelty and just a hint of malice. The real experts are the ladies of the ton, masters of subtle interrogation, arching their eyebrows into question marks and pretending surprise at everything, even things they arrange themselves. "Oh, I had no idea Lady Bellingham was so fond of poetry readings with Lord Wexley," someone will murmur, all innocence and razor blades. Within hours, invitations are being rescinded, alliances reconfigured, and at least one person is considering a strategic trip to the countryside. Servants, meanwhile, are the unseen conductors of this symphony of suspicion. Maids carry news upstairs and down, footmen exchange tidbits over ale, and the butler, who hears everything and says nothing, silently adjusts the seating chart, placing enemies just far enough apart to avoid an actual duel. If you want to know what's really going on, you'd do better bribing the scullery maid than reading the morning papers, for the truly daring scandal can be a tool. Some relish a little notoriety, just enough to keep things interesting, but not enough to be shipped off to Bath for the waters. A clever slip here, a whispered confession there, and suddenly you're the subject of speculative admiration rather than open condemnation. It's a careful balancing act. Too much excitement and you're ostracised. Too little, and you risk being labelled dull, the ultimate social death sentence. Secrets, of course, are rarely kept for long. Confidences exchanged over tea or in the back garden have a way of blooming into full-fledged dramas by the following week. Lovers' quarrels, overdue debts, a secret stash of French chocolates, each is grist for the gossip mill. The best defence? Absolute desirability. Practice your look of wide-eyed innocence in the mirror and keep your story straight. Even if you can't remember exactly why your gloves were found on the terrace at midnight, there are strategies for survival. Befriend the right people, preferably those who have as much to lose as you do. Keep your private correspondence private. Double seal those letters and pray your maid is loyal. And when in doubt, start a harmless rumour about yourself. Something amusing enough to distract, but not enough to alarm. Did you hear? Lady Fenwick once wore mismatched stockings to church. Scandalous, but survivable. Sometimes, though, the rumour mill grinds a little too fine. A harmless flirtation snowballs into a full-blown scandal, and suddenly you're being gently advised to take the air in Bath. Exile is never stated outright, but it's universally understood, a quiet period of reflection and boredom until society is distracted by a fresh disaster. In the end, the only constant in Regency society is that nothing stays secret forever, so you master the art of smiling through whispers, laugh at the right jokes, and always, always remember, in the war of words, survival favours the nimble, the well-connected, and those who know how to keep a secret, or at least how to spread one artfully. Sometimes you simply recline on a chaise lounge and stare meaningfully at a window for 3 hours, pondering the tragedy of being so wealthy and yet so bored. You'd start a hobby, but you're too tired from all that napping. In Regency England, idleness isn't just permitted, it's practically a virtue. The truly elite have mastered the art of filling their days with a dizzying amount of nothing, all while giving the impression that something terribly important is happening. The chaise lounge becomes your command post. A book lies open in your lap, unread for days, its pages occasionally turned to maintain the illusion of progress. You gaze out over the lawn with the mournful air of a poet in decline, though in truth you're counting sheep, carriages, or just the seconds until tea. Boredom is a status symbol. If you're busy, people might assume you have to be. Far better to appear perpetually at leisure, as though strenuous activity might threaten the delicate balance of your constitution. You could play the pianoforte, practice your sketching, or attempt a little watercolour. But all such activities require motivation, and besides, you're still recovering from the exertion of standing up to greet Aunt Dorothea earlier. Better to simply lounge, perfectly attired, as the clock ticks with the urgency of a melting candle. Occasionally inspiration will strike. You contemplate a walk in the garden, but this would mean summoning a servant to find your bonnet and shawl, and frankly, the garden will still be there tomorrow. You flirt with the idea of embroidery, but your sampler is still somewhere in the bottom drawer, last seen languishing beneath a stack of half-finished letters and social invitations you'll never answer. Your brother floats in, mutters something about riding out, and collapses into an armchair beside you. The two of you stare in companionable silence, united by the shared labour of existing. Time passes strangely in these moments. You imagine yourself as a statue in some future museum, described as in a characteristic pose of gentle ennui, circa 1812. Every now and then a servant enters to poke at the fire or dust around your feet, offering a faintly accusatory cough, as if to remind you that, yes, it is still daylight, and no, you have not moved. The house itself conspires in your idleness. The clock in the hall chimes the hour, which you ignore. Somewhere, a distant relative is having a productive day, and you wish them well from the safety of your upholstered fortress. Even the family dog seems bored, flopping down beside you, sighing deeply and watching the world with the resigned patience of a minor philosopher. You could take up a cause, perhaps write a pamphlet about local improvements or sponsor a new bridge. But the very thought of picking up a pen feels exhausting. Besides, you already sat up for nearly an hour this morning writing a birthday note to your cousin. How much more can society ask of one person? Eventually, hunger stirs you from your reverie. You debate sending for a small cake, but the effort of finding the bell pull is overwhelming. Instead, you compromise by daydreaming about cake, occasionally glancing at the tea tray with the hope that someone, anyone, will read your mind and bring you a snack. As the afternoon sunlight fades and the shadows grow longer, you stretch luxuriously, satisfied that you have accomplished precisely nothing. The day has passed as days often do in Regency England, with little fuss and no measurable achievement. And isn't that, after all, the ultimate privilege? You rise at last, refreshed by your dedication to leisure, and prepare yourself, emotionally, spiritually and sartorially, for the next great trial, staying awake through another evening of polite conversation. For now, you are the reigning champion of doing nothing at all. A trip to Bond Street is both a sport and a display of power. You buy hats you'll never wear and trinkets you don't even like, all for the sake of appearances. Bonus points if you bankrupt a rival by driving up the price of imported silk. Shopping in Regency England is less about necessity and more about making a statement. The destination is always the same: Bond Street, the glittering artery of fashionable life, where the wealthy parade their fortunes and the shopkeepers develop the keen gaze of poker champions. This isn't your modern, errand-filled grocery run. It's theatre, competition, and public relations all rolled into one. The only thing heavier than your coin purse is the weight of societal expectation. Preparation is everything. Before you even set foot on the pavement, you must be properly attired. A new bonnet, ideally one that no one else owns, gloves with exactly 0 wrinkles, and a parasol so ornate it could double as a stage prop. Servants help you into the carriage, where you rehearse your lines, witty remarks for the milliner, veiled insults for rivals, and the all-important, "Oh, I suppose I could afford one more ribbon if it's absolutely necessary." Upon arrival, you are greeted by the eager staff of every shop, each one hoping to secure your patronage and perhaps a few juicy tidbits of gossip. Shop windows gleam with displays of hats, fans, gloves, and every imaginable accessory. You pause outside each one, assessing both merchandise and the competition. The key to a successful shopping expedition is not just buying, it's being seen buying, preferably while laughing carelessly at the price. Inside, the fun really begins. The milliner rushes forward with the latest in French feathered extravagance. "All the rage in Paris," she declares, even as you wonder how many pigeons gave their lives for this particular hat. The dressmaker unveils bolts of silk so luminous they could guide ships in fog. You nod sagely, inspecting fabrics you'll never remember, all the while glancing sideways at Lady Prunella, who is pretending to be uninterested in the very same shade of blue. There are rituals to this game. You must haggle, not to save money, but to demonstrate that you could pay full price and simply choose not to. 10 guineas for this reticule? My dear, is it lined with gold? You sigh, as Lady Prunella bristles and quietly signals her own interest. If you're particularly cunning, you feign delight at a less fashionable item, hoping your rival will rush to snap it up, and thus mark herself as hopelessly out of touch by next week. You buy gifts for relatives you barely tolerate, and order gloves in every colour, just in case there's a sudden shortage of mauve. Trinkets pile up, porcelain snuff boxes, hand-painted fans, a paperweight in the shape of a pineapple. Each purchase is both a souvenir and a signal, proof to the world and to yourself that you're at the very centre of things. Of course, the shopping isn't truly about possessions. It's about the stories you'll tell afterward. How you discovered a rare bolt of Spanish lace. How you rescued a fellow shopper from choosing last season's bonnet. How you outbid 3 duchesses for a parasol shaped like a swan. Shopping is reputation, and reputation is everything. You leave each shop with parcels stacked precariously in your maid's arms, and the knowledge that you've given the Bond Street grapevine something to whisper about. By the end of the spree, your purse is lighter, your spirits oddly high, and your home just a little more cluttered. Back in the drawing room, you regale your family with tales of cunning bargains and near misses with disaster. You have survived Bond Street fashionably, triumphantly, and with just enough left over for tea. In Regency England, shopping is a competitive sport where winning means never wearing the same bonnet twice, and always letting everyone know you could have spent even more. Dinner is where alliances are forged and enemies are made, usually over overcooked pheasant and suspect aspic. The wine flows, the conversation sparkles, and someone always says something that will haunt them for years. The dinner party in Regency England is the main event, a nightly performance where everyone's true talents, or lack thereof, are put on spectacular candlelit display. The first challenge is simply arriving. Coaches pile up in the gravel drive, each footman struggling to announce names without butchering them beyond recognition. Once inside, you are herded through a sea of silk and brocade, nodding and bowing your way toward a room so fragrant with roasted meats and beeswax that you could lose your sense of smell for a week. Seating is a delicate operation, orchestrated by the hostess like a military campaign. You pray to be placed near someone tolerable, someone who can discuss poetry, horses, or at the very least, scandalous family history. But fate is capricious, and more often than not you're sandwiched between an aunt who believes in the medicinal power of boiled onions and a baronet determined to corner you on the subject of crop rotation. The only hope for entertainment is the prospect of an unexpected seating disaster. Last year's notorious incident with the gravy boat is still spoken of in hushed tones. The meal itself is a parade of dubious delicacies. Soup arrives first, usually tepid and mysterious, followed by a series of courses ranging from the vaguely edible to the outright alarming. There's always a roast, pheasant or mutton or some unfortunate woodland creature, surrounded by vegetables boiled into oblivion. Aspic, the Regency chef's answer to culinary boredom, makes its sticky, jiggling appearance. You contemplate its origins, then decide some mysteries are better left unsolved. Throughout the evening, footmen move like silent phantoms, refilling glasses and whisking away plates just as you work up the nerve to try the pickled eel. Conversation is the true main course, and it's served in endless, overlapping portions. The topics rotate. Local gossip, new plays, the prospect of rain. Witty remarks bounce across the table like tennis balls, with each guest secretly vying for the title of most entertaining. You laugh in the right places, nod sagely at the wrong ones, and do your best not to spill anything down your front, though that too is considered a time-honoured tradition. Of course, no dinner party is complete without a little disaster. Someone will drop a fork, mistake the fish knife for the dessert spoon, or, in a moment of distraction, set fire to a sleeve with the candelabra. The house's most illustrious tale concerns the unfortunate Lord Haddock, who once launched a bread roll so powerfully across the table that it landed in Lady Wilkinson's bosom, resulting in a minor scandal and several unrepeatable jokes. As the meal winds down, the wine flows more freely and tongues grow looser. Old grudges resurface, secret alliances are hinted at, and the younger set stifle giggles behind their napkins. Someone, emboldened by the third course of claret, tells a joke just a shade too risque, and the older relatives pretend not to notice. The final course, a towering confection of sugar and bravado, is paraded through, a triumph of style over substance. Eventually the ladies rise, floating away in clouds of perfume to gossip in the drawing room, while the gentlemen remain behind to debate politics, brandy, and who really won the Great Cheese Incident of '7. You retreat, head spinning, stomach braced, and already dreading the next invitation. Because in Regency England, dinner isn't just a meal. It's an Olympic sport, a social labyrinth, and a cautionary tale, all served up with a side of overcooked vegetables and questionable aspic. And you wouldn't miss it for the world. You twirl, you bow, you sweat profusely under a chandelier the size of a small planet. The ballroom is a battlefield disguised as a social gathering, and survival requires sharp elbows and even sharper wit. From the moment you step into the grand ballroom, the air is thick with anticipation and a cocktail of perfume, pomade, and the faint odour of panic. The polished floor gleams like a frozen lake, daring anyone to attempt to waltz without risking a public fall from grace. Every inch of the room sparkles with the light of 1,000 candles, all reflected back from polished mirrors and enough cut glass to make even the wealthiest guest nervous about errant elbows. Your entrance is an event unto itself. You glide, or at least attempt to, across the marble, praying your shoes haven't decided to rebel. The footmen announce your name with solemn gravity, and all eyes turn to assess dress, hair, posture, and whether your escort is a triumph or an embarrassment. You scan the crowd, searching for familiar faces, and keeping a mental note of enemies and exes, because the wrong dance partner could haunt your social standing until next season. The dances begin and the real contest starts. It isn't about rhythm, it's about strategy. Each set, quadrille, cotillion, or the scandalously intimate waltz is an opportunity to display both grace and connections. The wrong partner spells boredom. The right one could mean whispered offers of secret information, or, on rare occasion, actual romance. You spin through the figures, careful not to lock eyes too long with anyone's chaperone, who watches from the perimeter with the intensity of a royal bodyguard. Every movement is choreographed to the edge of absurdity. There are steps to remember, bows to execute, and fans to flutter in code. A dropped glove could signal anything from romantic interest to an urgent need for more punch. Conversation during a dance is an Olympic sport. You must appear interested, but not too interested. Witty, but not threatening. And never, under any circumstances, mention politics or the price of sheep. All the while, the music swells, sometimes too fast, sometimes too slow, always a little too loud. The musicians, paid by the hour, play with the vigour of men who know they'll have to perform again for supper in just a few hours. Occasionally, a guest faints from the heat, the excitement or the horror of realising they've just danced 2 sets in a row with their own cousin. Refreshment is both a reprieve and a fresh gauntlet. You make your way to the sideboard for lemonade or a glass of questionable claret, elbowing through a crowd of giggling debutantes and bored dowagers. Someone always spills a drink, someone else always laughs too loudly, and an argument over the proper way to hold a fan threatens to break out by the windows. In the corner, a pair of rivals accidentally bump into each other and exchange barbed compliments sharper than the carving knives at dinner. By the night's end, your feet ache, your hair wilts, and your memory of who's slighted whom is hopelessly tangled. Yet as you bow and curtsy your way through the final set, you know that survival here is about more than dance steps. It's about reading the room, dodging drama, and managing to look radiant under pressure and candlelight. As the orchestra strikes up the last notes and the guests begin their careful retreat, you exhale in relief. The battlefield clears, you have survived the ballroom. No fainting, no feet crushed, and most importantly no public disgrace. Tomorrow the gossip will fly. But tonight you've spun and sparkled with the best of them. In Regency England, the ballroom is the heart of drama, the soul of society, and occasionally the birthplace of lifelong grudges, all in a night's work, beneath that shimmering chandelier. When the sun sets, the real business begins. Lovers sneak into gardens, rival heirs exchange whispered threats, and the servants place bets on who'll get caught. The night is full of secrets, moonlight, and the constant threat of being discovered by your mother. The transition from the dazzling chaos of the ballroom to the hush of late night is almost imperceptible. One moment you're dodging elbows on the dance floor, the next you're slipping out a side door, the weight of 1,000 unspoken words pressing against your chest. The garden, so proper by daylight, transforms after dark into a labyrinth of shadows and whispered possibilities. The stone benches, usually reserved for daytime gossip, now play host to clandestine meetings and the occasional broken heart. If you listen carefully, you can catch the soft crunch of gravel beneath hurried feet, the flutter of a fan snapping shut in indignation, and the stifled giggles of a couple trying, unsuccessfully, to hide behind a potted laurel. Moonlight glints off a dropped hairpin, evidence of a hasty escape or perhaps the beginning of a love story doomed to be recounted at every family gathering for generations. Meanwhile, the house hums with intrigue of its own. In dimly lit corridors, rival siblings meet to plot their latest strategies, trading barbed compliments and sly warnings. The air is thick with anticipation, and everyone knows the rules. What happens after midnight might be forgiven by dawn, as long as it's not too scandalous or at least not too public. Servants move through this after-hours world with the grace of seasoned spies. The best of them can pass unnoticed through parlours and pantries, overhearing everything and revealing nothing, except perhaps in the sanctity of the servants' quarters, where bets are laid on which guest will be caught in the conservatory, and who will end up having to explain themselves to the family solicitor. For the truly bold, the late hours are an opportunity to negotiate fortunes, plan elopements, or, if desperate, raid the kitchens for leftover cake. There's a kind of freedom that comes with the darkness, a temporary suspension of the endless etiquette and careful conversation that governs daylight hours. Your best friend might morph into a conspirator, an old rival into an unlikely ally, all under the knowing gaze of the moon. Yet danger is never far behind. There is always the possibility of an untimely encounter with a chaperone returning for her shawl, or a well-meaning aunt wandering the halls in search of a misplaced cat. You learn to move quietly, always ready with a plausible excuse, just out for air, Aunt Mildred, and a quick route back to respectability should disaster strike. Sometimes intrigue is unintentional. A toppled vase, a spilled cup of tea, a door creaking at exactly the wrong moment. These small catastrophes can unravel a night's worth of careful planning. Tales of midnight mishaps spread like wildfire, the details growing more outrageous with each retelling. What began as a simple walk in the garden can become by morning a saga involving mistaken identities, runaway horses, and the tragic loss of a perfectly good hat. But there is magic in these secret hours, a sense that for a brief moment you might escape the weight of titles and expectations. The world is softer, the boundaries blurred, and everyone, just for a while, is allowed to dream. As dawn approaches, the whispers fade and you slip back into the house, smoothing your hair and practicing your most innocent expression. Whatever happened in the night is carefully locked away, ready to resurface at the next family gathering, or whenever someone needs a reminder that in Regency England the real adventures always happen after dark. Soap is rare, baths are rarer, and your cologne could drop a charging ox. Everyone's hair is a fire hazard, and deodorant is just a rumour started by the French. Smelling rich is a full-time job. In Regency England, personal hygiene is more theatre than science. It's about conjuring an illusion of freshness rather than actually achieving it. Bathing, for the upper crust, is not a daily event, but an ordeal requiring Herculean effort and the logistics of a minor military campaign. Drawing a bath means several servants, a parade of steaming buckets, and the risk of flooding the floor or, on one memorable occasion, the parlour below. The household staff talk about bath days with the same foreboding as a lunar eclipse. You, meanwhile, try to feign enthusiasm while quietly hoping to delay the whole operation by at least another week. Instead, you rely on the daily sponge bath, wielded with caution, and only to those areas likely to be exposed to the public, or especially judgmental relatives. Spot cleaning, they call it, as if you're a piece of fine silverware. Soap is precious and not always easy on the skin, made from lye, animal fat, and fragrances of varying appeal. It leaves your hands oddly sticky and your pride a little battered. Most days you dab wrists and neck with rose water or lavender, close your eyes, and hope for the best. Hair is a battle all its own. For men, pomade and powder combine to create styles so rigid you could bounce a penny off them. For women, it's hours of brushing, curling and sculpting, finished with clouds of scented powder so thick it's a wonder anyone survived a single candlelit soirée without spontaneous combustion. Rumour has it the Countess of Dalrymple once lost an entire hairpiece to a particularly robust breeze, and no one has opened a window during dinner since. Deodorant, as we know it, does not exist. Instead, you depend on strategically applied colognes, vinegars and bouquets of herbs tucked in places no one dares discuss. Perfume is your shield and your sword. The goal is to arrive at an event leaving a fragrant trail so strong it could guide lost travellers through fog. Richness is measured not in cleanliness, but in how creatively you can cover the evidence of having lived. If you leave a room and your scent lingers for 10 minutes, you're considered a triumph. If it lingers for an hour, you're politely asked not to sit on the velvet. Laundry, likewise, is both a privilege and a pain. Clothes are rarely washed, because water, soap and agitation wear out the precious fabrics and fade the latest imported dyes. Instead, garments are aired out on the line, spritzed with floral water and beaten with sticks, sometimes all at once. You own enough linen under things to rotate through without having to face the laundrymaid's disapproving glare too often. If something truly unspeakable happens, involving, say, a muddy dog and the Duchess's best carpet, then and only then will a gown or coat endure the agony of a proper scrub. Teeth are scrubbed with twigs, charcoal, or whatever abrasive substance is fashionable this month. Mouthwash is more likely to burn than refresh, and everyone is slightly wary of smiling too broadly in candlelight. In some households, breath fresheners made from cloves and aniseed are all that stands between you and social exile. And yet, with all these creative efforts, the result is a society that smells unmistakably of privilege, layers of rose, bergamot, old wool and ambition. It is a perfume so distinct, so powerful, that it could only belong to the filthy rich. In Regency England, if you can fake being clean, you can survive anything. Or at least, you can survive until the next bath day. Your physician prescribes leeches for headaches and brandy for everything else. Surgery is performed by candlelight, and dental care is a medieval fever dream. You pray for good health, and even harder for good genes. In Regency England, your health is a precarious balancing act, less about medical knowledge, more about blind luck and a robust constitution. Doctors parade through your home with gravitas, brandishing stethoscopes, recently invented, rarely understood, and writing prescriptions in handwriting so illegible it may as well be ancient Greek. The only certainty is that no matter your ailment, you'll be subjected to a routine that hasn't changed much since the reign of the Plantagenets: rest, hope, and, if things look dire, an emergency consultation with the family priest. Medical advice is delivered with absolute confidence and virtually no evidence. Feeling lightheaded? The doctor recommends a brisk walk, followed by a restorative nap, and the application of leeches to your temples. Suffering from melancholy? He prescribes a course of mineral water, a change of scenery, and perhaps a dose of laudanum, which is essentially opium diluted in hope. For stomach complaints, the universal remedy is brandy, applied internally, externally, and, if necessary, used to anesthetize any witnesses. The family medicine chest is a treasure trove of dubious miracles, vials of smelling salts, blistering ointments, and enough camphor to fumigate a small abbey. For coughs, there's syrup thick enough to patch a leaky roof. For fevers, you're wrapped in layers of blankets and left to sweat out your sins, while the household debates whether you should be bled or simply offered more toast. Bleeding, after all, is the Regency doctor's go-to move. If you're ill, clearly you have too much blood. If you're weak, it's because the last doctor took too much. Either way, you're not leaving the house anytime soon. Dental care, if you can call it that, is an exercise in bravery. Toothache is a constant companion. The only available relief is a swig of something strong and the hope that the local barber surgeon is in a good mood. Extractions are performed with pliers and prayer. False teeth, made from ivory, bone, or the teeth of the recently deceased, are both an engineering marvel and a daily hazard. You learn to chew on one side and to smile cautiously in candlelight. Surgery, when it can't be avoided, is a last resort spectacle. The patient is laid out on the kitchen table, curtains drawn to spare the faint of heart. Instruments are sterilized by boiling, if you're lucky, or wiped on someone's apron if you're not. Anesthetic is wishful thinking, usually just brandy, a leather strap to bite, and the encouragement of a crowd. If you survive, you're a local legend. If not, the undertaker is already waiting by the door. Preventative medicine, meanwhile, is a charming mixture of superstition and trial and error. You might be advised to carry a sachet of rosemary to ward off bad airs, or wear red flannel undergarments to keep your liver warm. No one really knows why these things work, but no one's willing to risk finding out that they don't. And so, you make your peace with uncertainty. A good set of genes is more valuable than the finest dowry. You hope your ancestors passed down something more robust than gout and weak ankles. Each time you sneeze, someone gasps. Each time you recover, the doctor takes credit, and the household celebrates with an extra round of brandy. In Regency England, survival is as much a miracle as it is a science. So you cross your fingers, sleep with a clove under your pillow, and thank your lucky stars every morning you wake up with all your teeth still in your head. Below the marble floors, the real action happens. The staff work like a finely tuned, slightly mutinous orchestra. They see everything, know everything, and could destroy your reputation over a badly folded napkin. While the family glides above, trailing silk and scandal, the servant's domain pulses with its own energy. The kitchen is a furnace of activity, where the cook barks orders and wields her wooden spoon like a sceptre. Scullery maids scrub endlessly, up to their elbows in a mysterious grey foam of indeterminate origin, while footmen polish silver and daydream about running away to join a less exhausting household. Even the lowest-ranking boot boy has an opinion about your new waistcoat, he just whispers it to the cat. The hierarchy below stairs is as rigid and complex as any peerage. The butler presides with the solemnity of a minor bishop, keys jangling like a warning bell as he patrols the halls. He knows everyone's secrets, which family member sneaks pastries at midnight, who leaves love notes under the wisteria, and what really happened to the missing soup tureen. The housekeeper, equal in power and even sterner, rules her domain with a look that can shrivel an undercooked pudding at 30 paces. Her staff moves in perfect unison, driven by a heady mix of terror, loyalty, and the distant dream of one day running their own immaculate household, or at least one with fewer stairs. Meals below stairs are less formal but no less competitive. Gossip is the main course, served hot and fresh at every opportunity. The servants know who's in debt, who's in love, and who's in trouble, long before any member of the family suspects a thing. Nicknames abound, Lady Sleepwalker, Sir Sniffles, Miss Marmalade, and no blunder goes unnoticed. A single mislaid handkerchief, a stained cravat, or an errant lock of hair is enough to spark hours of spirited speculation, and woe betide the family member who forgets to tip at Christmas. Tales of their stinginess will echo through the servant grapevine for years. The young maids giggle about the youngest son's attempts at poetry. The footmen have a running wager on which guest will faint first at the next ball. In the quiet moments, the cook swaps recipes with the gardener, who in turn keeps a sharp eye out for wandering sheep, mysterious visitors, and the ongoing war against moles in the rose garden. The staff's unofficial motto is simple: seen, not heard, unless we're talking to each other. They move like ghosts at banquets, refill wine glasses before anyone realises they're empty, and clear away chaos after every gathering with a speed that borders on supernatural. They manage everything from minor catastrophes, the pugs have escaped again, to major crises, Lady Featherstone's hat is on fire, with barely a flicker of emotion. But make no mistake, this is not a life of mindless drudgery. The servants have their own traditions, superstitions, and celebrations. There's singing in the scullery, secret late-night card games in the pantry, and the annual Christmas party where, just for one night, rank is forgotten and everyone dances until dawn. And while the upstairs folk may imagine themselves the centre of the universe, the real universe runs on cups of strong tea, a little harmless scheming, and the silent camaraderie of people who know they'll have to work together again tomorrow. So next time you descend the servants' stairs, spare a thought for the army of hands who keep your world spinning, quietly, expertly, and with just enough mischief to keep things interesting. In Regency England, the line between order and chaos is measured in folded napkins, polished boots, and the stories whispered behind every closed door. As midnight approaches, you slip into sleep with a final cup of spiced wine, a last perfunctory prayer, and a dozen superstitions to keep away ghosts, thieves, and nosy aunts. Tomorrow it all begins again, if you survive the night without accidentally burning down your own four-poster bed. Bedtime in Regency England is an event in itself, attended with nearly as much ceremony and anxiety as a royal wedding. Your day's finery is peeled away layer by layer, revealing the simpler, softer undergarments of night, linen, flannel, or, if you're feeling especially luxurious, silk. A maid stands by with a warm nightgown, careful not to let the fabric brush the fireplace. Last winter's disaster is still a favourite subject of servant gossip. Next comes the time-honoured ritual of making the bed, a procedure involving at least 2 servants, 1 feather mattress, 3 or 4 blankets, no one quite remembers how many, and a multitude of pillows. Each is plumped, fluffed, and arranged with the care of someone packing the crown jewels. The goal? To create a sleeping environment as soft as a cloud, though, in practice, it usually feels more like a slightly lumpy fortress with unexpected cold spots. Of course, no Regency sleep is possible without a brief consultation of household superstitions. You might request that a sprig of lavender or rosemary be tucked beneath your pillow to ward off nightmares and miasmas. The curtains are drawn tight, partly for privacy, but mostly to keep out the wandering spirits and the chilly draughts that slip under doorways after midnight. A shoe is left pointed toward the window, a time-honoured trick for confusing mischievous ghosts or over-enthusiastic burglars. You pause for a quick prayer, recited from memory and tailored to the concerns of the day, gratitude for surviving another dinner party, a plea for Aunt Hortense to forget your unfortunate comment about her poodle, and a desperate hope that the mice will steer clear of your slippers tonight. A final glance around the room ensures that the candle is snuffed. After last month's incident involving a flaming bed curtain, everyone's extra vigilant. Still, the faint scent of singed linen lingers, a smoky reminder that bedtime here is never entirely free from danger. Settling into bed is not as easy as it sounds. You burrow into the covers, adjusting pillows, arranging arms and legs, only to discover that the sheets are either too cold or suspiciously warm in one spot. Somewhere in the house, the grandfather clock tolls the hour. From downstairs you might hear the soft closing of a door or the muffled laughter of servants winding down from the day's labours. Outside, a fox yips and the night wind sighs, and you pull the covers up to your chin, convinced just for a moment that every shadow hides a ghost or a gossiping aunt. Yet, with the rituals completed and the bed finally comfortable, sleep does eventually come. You drift off to dreams of tomorrow's breakfast, next week's ball, and the endless cycle of fashion, flirtation, and very soft cheese. There's a peculiar comfort in the knowledge that, for all the day's absurdities, you've made it through one more turn of the social carousel, and that tomorrow, with any luck, you'll get to do it all over again. As your eyelids flutter shut, you release one last quiet sigh, a mix of relief, exhaustion, and mild anticipation for what fresh chaos the morning will bring. And with that, the house settles into its midnight hush, every creak and whisper safely tucked away until dawn. In Regency England, even bedtime is an adventure, and the simple act of surviving the night sometimes feels like the greatest victory of all. You may be rich, but comfort is a distant cousin twice removed. Before every event, you're trussed up like a decorative roast, corseted, laced, stuffed, and pinned into clothing engineered by people with a grudge against circulation. Breathe too deeply, and you risk a wardrobe malfunction that could make tomorrow's gossip columns. The price of beauty, occasional fainting, daily suffering, and a deep spiritual longing for sweatpants. In Regency England, fashion is not just about looking good, it's about demonstrating your willingness to suffer in silence for the sake of society. Getting dressed is less a simple morning routine and more a feat of athletic endurance and psychological warfare. The process begins hours before you're expected anywhere, with the ritualistic laying out of garments by your long-suffering maid or valet, who has mastered the art of tight-lipped sympathy. For women, the enemy is the corset, a contraption of whalebone, laces, and optimism, designed to sculpt the perfect silhouette while gently threatening your internal organs. Lacing up is a team sport, and the language involved would make a sailor blush. You hold onto the bedpost, grit your teeth, and pray for mercy as your maid yanks with all her might. Breathing becomes a hobby for later. You promise yourself you'll only faint in the most picturesque way possible, preferably into the arms of someone eligible. Men, meanwhile, face their own daily gauntlet. Cravats, those infamously complicated neckcloths, are the bane of any well-dressed gentleman. There are entire pamphlets devoted to their proper tying, and the current fashion demands at least 17 distinct folds, all achieved with trembling hands and a healthy dose of existential dread. If your cravat is too loose, you'll be deemed sloppy, too tight, and you risk a swoon before the first course is served. Either way, the neckwear will haunt your dreams. Layer upon layer is added. Petticoats and chemises for women, waistcoats and tailored coats for men. Every button and ribbon is a test of patience, each seam a reminder that comfort was clearly not a design priority. Sleeves balloon, skirts widen, collars stiffen to the point that turning your head becomes an advanced yoga pose. And then there are the shoes, delicate creations that look charming but feel like medieval punishment devices. You teeter through the halls, each step a gamble between style and survival. The effort doesn't stop at clothing. Hair must be curled, powdered, or pomaded into shapes that defy the laws of nature. Women endure hours under hot irons, hairpins multiplying like rabbits until your scalp resembles a fortified hedgehog. Men sit stoically while their barbers plaster on enough product to turn a light drizzle into a major engineering crisis. All of this is topped with hats and bonnets so large they could double as lifeboats in an emergency. Accessories are another minefield. Gloves must fit perfectly, snug enough to show off your slender fingers, but not so tight that you can't accept a dance card or, in desperate times, a second helping of cake. Fans, parasols, reticules, fobs, and walking sticks each come with their own unspoken rules, violations of which may result in the sort of social disgrace from which few ever recover. Yet, despite the agony, everyone perseveres. You bear your corset marks and chafed neck with the pride of a battle-scarred veteran, trading stories of wardrobe malfunctions and fashion-induced injuries like war tales. Comfort is sacrificed at the altar of appearance, and all the while, deep down, you nurture a private fantasy of one day slipping into something soft, loose, and blissfully ugly. In Regency England, looking good is a triumph of willpower over anatomy. You may not be able to sit, breathe, or turn your head, but you'll be the best-dressed person gasping for air in the room. And isn't that, after all, what really matters? Being wealthy in Regency England means treating minor insults like declarations of war. Did Lady Harrowby accidentally spill tea on your new gown? Was your invitation to Lord Butterfield's soirée mysteriously lost in the post? Every day is a fresh opportunity for a strategic snubbing, elaborate revenge, or an all-out feud that future historians will pretend to care about. You might think that with so much wealth, leisure, and fine wallpaper to distract them, the upper crust would have little time for drama. On the contrary, society's true pastime isn't dancing, nor dining, nor even shopping for hats with the circumference of a carriage wheel. It's the subtle art of social warfare. Every interaction is an opportunity to score points, collect grudges, and one-up your neighbours in ways that will be discussed and embellished for years to come. Petty rivalries are the lifeblood of Regency society. They thrive on slights real and imagined, and the tiniest perceived insult is enough to set the entire social ecosystem aflutter. A snub at the assembly, a delayed return visit, a less than enthusiastic compliment on a new hairstyle, each as ammunition in an endless, bloodless battle. Invitations become weapons. To not receive one is to be publicly erased, your absence noted, whispered about and analysed until it takes on the proportions of a national scandal. And heaven help you if you're the instigator. Accidentally forgetting to greet someone at the opera, or offering an obviously regifted bonbonniere as a hostess gift, are strategies as old as powdered wigs. The rules are unwritten but ruthlessly enforced. Feuds can last for years, quietly simmering beneath the surface. Your mother might still hold a grudge against Lady Pomeroy for wearing the same shade of lilac at a ball in 1798. Revenge, when it comes, is served at room temperature, usually alongside a dry remark and a plate of tepid aspic. Social sabotage is an art form. The placement of dinner guests, the order of introductions, the timing of letters, all are calculated for maximum effect. If your rival is seated next to an eccentric aunt with a tendency to recount embarrassing childhood stories, so much the better. You might accidentally praise a rival's gown for its daring use of colour, knowing full well it clashes with every rug in the drawing room. Sometimes the feuds go public. A whispered remark becomes a rumour becomes an anecdote, and suddenly everyone is discussing the unfortunate incident of the toppled centrepiece or the scandalous behaviour at last year's garden party. The true professionals know how to fan these flames just enough to keep things interesting without letting the entire house burn down. Of course, there are alliances too, temporary, shifting, as fickle as the weather. Today's confidant might be tomorrow's adversary. You trade secrets like currency, never forgetting that the friend you're gossiping with now might be the one to spread your story next week. There is an unspoken respect among those who play the game well. A nod to a cleverly timed compliment, a private smile at an especially artful snub. For the uninitiated, all this can seem exhausting, even dangerous. But for those born into it, social warfare is simply another facet of daily life. It gives texture to otherwise dull afternoons, and purpose to endless rounds of calls and correspondence. Besides, what's the point of having the best china, the most opulent carriage, or the fluffiest peacocks if you can't wield them like the arsenal they are? And so, the rivalries continue, generation after generation. Small wounds nursed, victories savoured, humiliations quietly avenged. One day, future historians will puzzle over a furious feud sparked by nothing more than a misplaced glove or an ill-timed yawn. But in Regency England, it's all perfectly normal. After all, it wouldn't be high society if everyone actually got along. You can afford a carriage, a coachman, and horses with names fancier than most people's children. But travel is still a medieval obstacle course. Muddy roads, suspiciously aggressive geese, and wheels designed to snap at the most embarrassing moment. Arriving fashionably late is easy when the universe and your footman are both in on the joke. In Regency England, the concept of travel is seductive in theory. A gleaming carriage, a team of glossy horses, a footman so impeccably dressed you suspect he might actually be royalty in disguise. The reality, however, is something closer to a rolling endurance test that would make a modern commuter clutch their train ticket in terror. Your carriage is a symbol of wealth, certainly, but also an ongoing reminder that engineering is at best an optimistic science. First, there's the preparation. No one simply leaves the house. There are trunks to be packed, reticules to be coordinated, snacks to be procured, and arguments to be had over the precise number of bonnets required for a 2-day journey. The household is thrown into mild chaos as the coachman loads and reloads the luggage, muttering about balance while your great-aunt insists on bringing her own travelling teapot, a portrait of her late spaniel, and an alarming number of ginger biscuits for the nerves. Once aboard, you settle into the upholstered interior, convinced, briefly, that this will be an elegant, relaxing ride. Within moments, reality sets in. The springs creak ominously. The carriage rocks side to side, threatening to spill you onto your neighbour's lap with every rut and stone. You cling to the window strap with one gloved hand, the other clutching a handkerchief scented with hope and eau de cologne. The roads themselves are a patchwork of hope and mud. In summer, you're dusted from head to toe, left blinking like a confused owl every time you disembark. In winter, the wheels sink into muck deep enough to lose a shoe, or a small cousin if you're not careful. Bridges creak, puddles conceal bottomless chasms, and every turn holds the promise of a flock of geese who have claimed right of way and aren't afraid to fight for it. Meanwhile, your coachman, selected for his loyalty and indifference to disaster, narrates the journey in gruff asides. "That's the third wheel I've seen off this week, milady. We'll be right as rain, provided we don't hit any sheep." The footman, perched perilously on the back, is responsible for leaping down to chase off livestock, repair minor catastrophes, and, on especially unlucky days, lift the entire coach out of a particularly tenacious rut. All this while maintaining the appropriate posture and looking just unimpressed enough to maintain the family's dignity. Inside, travel is a social event. You're squeezed between relatives, aunts fanning themselves and children asking, "Are we there yet?" at 30-second intervals. Someone is always slightly ill, someone else is always faint from hunger, and a third person insists on opening the window just as you pass a particularly fragrant stretch of countryside. For longer journeys, boredom sets in and parlour games begin. I Spy is a favourite, though most rounds are won by the hedgerow. Fashionably late is not a style choice, it's the only possible outcome. The moment you arrive, mud-splattered and windswept, you're expected to descend with the composure of a royal and pretend you are not nearly thrown into a ditch somewhere near Chipping Norton. The host smiles knowingly. After all, they too have stories of wheel mishaps, lost hat boxes, and heroic battles with aggressive farm animals. Still, there's a peculiar thrill to Regency travel. You've seen the countryside, battled the elements, survived aggressive geese, and made it to your destination in only minor disarray. You gather your skirts, square your shoulders, and prepare to tell the story at supper, leaving out, of course, the part where you nearly lost your bonnet to a particularly vengeful duck. In Regency England, travel is proof that arriving at all is half the adventure, and if you make it fashionably late, well, that's just tradition. Owning land sounds glamorous, right up until you have to deal with tenants, leaky roofs, and an accountant who keeps sighing at your accidental overdrafts. Your idea of estate management? Delegating everything and hoping nobody notices you can't read a crop report. Congratulations, you're the backbone of the British economy. No one's impressed. In Regency England, land is status. Acres equal influence, and a grand estate is a ticket to the upper crust of society. From a distance, the life of a landowner glitters with promise. Sweeping views, endless parties, and the soft sound of coin trickling into your coffers. The reality, however, is a never-ending stream of problems disguised as matters requiring your attention. If only you could attend to them without ever leaving the drawing room. The daily ordeal begins with the estate steward, a man whose patience is rivaled only by his capacity for tea and quiet disapproval. He arrives every morning with a ledger the size of a family Bible, and the expression of someone who knows exactly how many chickens have gone missing, and precisely who to blame. The steward's reports cover everything from the state of the hedgerows, unruly, to the price of barley, alarmingly unpredictable, all delivered in a tone that suggests he'd much rather you not interfere. Then there are the tenants, dozens of families whose names blur together after the first page of the rent roll. They're a hardy, persistent lot, adept at creative explanations for late payments and the sudden disappearance of sheep. Every so often you're required to tour the cottages, nodding sympathetically at leaky roofs and crumbling chimneys, while promising repairs you'll promptly forget to authorise. If you're especially unlucky, the visit coincides with improvements to the outbuildings, meaning you risk being cornered by an enthusiastic bailiff eager to demonstrate his new manure spreader. Repairs, of course, are endless. Roofs leak, fences collapse, and the kitchen garden, once the pride of the estate, now resembles an overgrown experiment in botanical chaos. Contractors arrive in droves, each with a different hat and a unique interpretation of reasonable cost. You approve plans with a flourish, sign checks with a sigh, and develop a fondness for the phrase, "Let's leave that to the steward, shall we?" There's also the matter of the household accounts maintained by an accountant whose primary hobby is sighing dramatically as he lays out your monthly expenditures. A new carriage, sir. 2, in fact. And this bill for imported pineapples. You smile, offer him a biscuit, and make vague promises to review expenses. Secretly, you hope your next card game will erase all memory of this conversation. Crop reports arrive at irregular intervals, covered in cryptic notes and references to blights, droughts, and the mysterious threat of weevils. You flip through them with the confidence of someone who's never seen a wheat field up close. Instead, you rely on the trusted wisdom of your staff, delegating every important decision with a cheerful, excellent, do whatever you think best. The staff, for their part, ensure the estate stays afloat, barely, while you focus on more pressing matters, like choosing new drapes for the library. And still, every gathering you attend is punctuated by the same questions from peers. How are your crops this year? Any luck with that new drainage system? Is it true you've doubled your sheep? You nod, murmur something about challenging conditions, and pray no one asks you to define crop rotation. In truth, managing an estate is less about control and more about survival, yours, and that of the poor souls tasked with keeping your world from literally falling apart. The backbone of the British economy? Perhaps. But behind every grand manor is a battalion of underappreciated stewards, tenants, and accountants sighing into the void. So here's to you, the noble landowner, master of delegation, champion of plausible deniability, and proud supporter of the national sigh industry. If only anyone was actually impressed. You have everything: silk, servants, endless leisure, and still, every so often, an icy dread seeps in. Is this all there is? You find yourself staring into the fire, contemplating the emptiness of existence, the fleeting nature of youth, and whether or not your best friend is secretly stealing your hair powder. Turns out ennui is the one luxury you can't return for store credit. This is the part no one puts in the portraits, the quiet hours, the long stretches of afternoon where nothing is demanded of you, nothing is urgent, and yet something feels off. You recline in a chair upholstered with enough damask to upholster a small chapel, And instead of comfort, you feel restless. The fire crackles, the clock ticks. You sigh dramatically, hoping someone notices. No one does. In Regency England, boredom is a chronic condition, especially among the wealthy. You've exhausted every sanctioned amusement. You've walked the grounds, you've hosted the dinners, you've played the cards, attended the balls, flirted appropriately, shopped excessively, and napped professionally. And now here you are again, wrapped in luxury and mild despair, wondering if this strange heaviness in your chest is philosophical insight or just indigestion from too many sponge cakes. Melancholy becomes fashionable. People speak of it in hushed poetic tones, as if sadness itself were an accessory, something to be worn with a thoughtful expression and a well-cut coat. You read gloomy poetry aloud, pausing meaningfully between lines, hoping it explains whatever it is you're feeling. It doesn't. But everyone nods politely, which helps. Sometimes you imagine a different life, something simpler, something involving purpose. You toy with the idea of charity work, then immediately feel tired. You consider learning a new skill, like painting or playing the harp, but abandon the thought halfway through because it sounds suspiciously like effort. Besides, someone else might already be better at it, and that would be devastating. You pace the room, you sit again, you stare at the fire some more. The flames dance, the shadows stretch, and your thoughts wander into dangerous territory. What if youth is slipping away? What if the best moments have already happened? What if everyone else secretly knows something you don't? What if this is the worst one, this is it? The servants, sensing a mood, bring tea. Tea helps, briefly. Then the thoughts creep back in, quieter now, but persistent. You wonder if your life has meaning beyond social calls and perfectly folded napkins. You wonder if history will remember you as anything more than present at many events. You wonder if your portrait looks slightly disappointed in you. This existential dread is inconvenient. There's no proper etiquette for it. You can't faint over it or cure it with brandy, though people certainly try. Doctors recommend fresh air. Relatives recommend marriage. Friends recommend pretending it doesn't exist and scheduling another party. All excellent advice, none of it effective. And yet this quiet dissatisfaction is everywhere. You see it in the eyes of others across the drawing room, flickering briefly before they smile again. You hear it in the sighs between conversations. You feel it settle in during the late hours, when the house finally goes still and there's nothing left to distract you from your own thoughts. So you do what everyone else does. You smooth your clothes, you straighten your posture, you carry on. Tomorrow there will be breakfast, letters, walks, visits, and obligations to fill the time. The routine will resume and the feeling will recede, never gone, just tucked away behind silk and ceremony. Because in Regency England, luxury can buy comfort, status, and beauty, but it can't buy purpose, and it certainly can't buy peace of mind. That, apparently, is extra. So tonight, as you melt into your mattress, hopefully free of mysterious lumps, damp sheets, or distant sounds of servants wrestling with chamber pots, take a moment to appreciate just how spectacularly ordinary your modern comforts really are. Because, let's be honest, surviving a single day as filthy rich in Regency England required more luck, patience, and powdered wigs than most of us could ever muster. You've endured corsets that doubled as medieval torture devices, social rules with the flexibility of a brick, and breakfast where the main course was anxiety. You've tiptoed through gossip, duels of wit, and at least 3 forms of passive-aggressive family warfare, all before tea time. You've been powdered, perfumed, and judged by a committee of pugs. But you made it. You survived scandalous rumours, avoided fainting at the dinner table, and somehow kept your cravat straight through the existential dread that comes from having more money than happiness. The truth is, even for the wealthy, Regency life was a dizzying dance, equal parts absurdity, boredom, and genuinely impressive resilience. And it turns out being pampered by a legion of servants doesn't protect you from bad luck, bad hygiene, or the sudden realization that you'd trade it all for a real shower and a pair of sweatpants. So as you drift off tonight, nestled in clean sheets with your favourite pillow and maybe a fan humming quietly in the corner, spare a thought for the brave souls of history who endured itchy stockings, judgmental aunts, and endless etiquette. Because history may be ridiculous, uncomfortable, and occasionally tragic, but it's also proof that humans, no matter how rich, will always find something to complain about, laugh about, and eventually be grateful for. May your dreams be free of social obligations, powdered wigs, and surprise dinner guests. Good night, and sleep well.